My husband greets me with divorce papers because I traveled to my mother's deathbed instead of attending my stepdaughter's 6-month wedding anniversary. I've been married to my husband, Neil, 45, for 3 years, although we dated for 2 years before getting married. He has a daughter, Gabriella, 24, from his previous marriage. When Neil and I started dating, Gabriella was in college. Although we weren't very close, we didn't get along. She came over during school breaks, we had family dinners, and everything seemed fine between us. There was no drama, no tension, just normal, polite interactions. Gabriella lost her mother when she was 16. Neil's ex-wife passed away suddenly, and I've always been very conscious of not overstepping her boundaries in her life. I didn't want or seek for her to feel like I was trying to replace her mother. So, instead of acting like a stepmother, I tried to be more of a friendly presence in her life, especially since she was already an adult when I came into Neil's life. Neil has always been very protective of Gabriella, and I understand that. She's been through a lot, losing her mother at such a young age. Over the years, I've seen how much she prioritizes her, whether it's dropping everything to help her move, spending hours on the phone if she's stressed, or making sure she has what she needs during important events, like finals or job changes. Honestly, I thought he was a great father because he was there for her so much more than other fathers, who barely pay child support. 6 months ago, Gabriella married her college sweetheart, Brian. It was a beautiful wedding, and he was genuinely happy for her. I helped a lot with the planning, offering to help wherever needed. I didn't want to overdo it, but I also wanted to show her that I cared and was there for her. At the wedding, she actually hugged me and told me she was happy her dad had found someone who cared about his family. That moment was very important for me, because I thought I was being accepted into the family, and that everything would be fine from that moment on. But after the wedding, things took a turn for the worse. Gabriella became more distant. He started canceling plans we'd made or simply ignoring my texts. When we did see each other, he barely spoke to me. So I stopped trying, as after a while, it was hard not to feel hurt. Neil didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he didn't say anything. Whenever I mentioned it, he told me to be patient and excused me by saying that Gabriella had been through a lot in her life. Then, a month ago, Gabriella announced that she and Brian were planning a celebration for their 6th wedding anniversary. We're not talking 6 years, but 6 months. She planned a small, intimate family dinner to celebrate their special bond. I thought it was a little odd, because it's not every day you hear about someone celebrating 6 months of marriage, and it wasn't even on the exact date of her anniversary. Instead, it was scheduled for a weekend, which I assumed was just to make it more convenient for everyone. But I kept my opinion to myself, because everyone is free to celebrate however they want. Neil, of course, was on board because he'd do anything to make Gabriella happy. 3 days ago, I received a call from my brother with terrible news. Our mother had suffered a massive stroke. The doctors weren't optimistic about her chances. My mother lives in California, while we're in Massachusetts, so it wasn't as if I could go see her right away. I have a very good relationship with my mother. She raised my siblings and me as a single mother, working multiple jobs to ensure we had a good life. She'd been there for me through it all, and now there was a real possibility of losing her. I knew I had to go see her as soon as possible. I immediately booked the first flight I could find to get to California. For me, my mom came first, especially in this state, and knowing it might be the last time I'd see her. This, of course, meant I'd miss Gabriella's celebration. I tried to explain the situation to both Neil and Gabriella. I told them about my mother's condition, how serious it was, and that I needed to go. I thought they'd understand, like any normal person, but Gabriella was furious. She'd been cold to me all these months, and now she was angry because I was going to see my mother on her deathbed. Neil, on the other hand, seemed torn. I could tell he didn't want to take sides, but then he said something that left me speechless. You should think carefully about your priorities. And that's what he was doing. My mother's life was ending, and they were upset about a 6-month anniversary dinner. I packed my bags, boarded the plane, and flew out that same afternoon. When I arrived at the hospital, my mother was barely conscious. I held her hand, told her how much I loved her, and stayed by her side all night. She passed away early the next morning, which at least gave me a farewell. It was a heartbreaking moment for me, but I'm so grateful to have been there with her in her final moments. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I was able to say goodbye. That's so much more than other children get from their parents. The day after the funeral, I flew home completely exhausted, both physically and emotionally. I barely slept, and was still trying to come to terms with the fact that my mother was gone. When I walked through the door, Neil was waiting for me. He didn't hug me or ask how I was. Instead, he handed me the divorce papers. He told me that since I didn't prioritize his family, he wouldn't prioritize me as his partner. He said that Gabriella was the most important thing to him, and that he needed to be with someone who would support that. He even told me, "Gabriella needs stability and support, and you've proven you can't provide it." My mother had just died, and now my husband was asking me for a divorce over a stupid 6-month celebration. If these circumstances hadn't arisen, I would have attended. I never said I wouldn't. But I think the situation warranted missing it. Besides, her father was there, and that should be the most important thing. She's been pretty distant with me these past few months, so it's not like she needs me. Everything feels surreal. But Neil didn't stop there. He continued talking about how he'd always been distant with Gabriella and how this was just the last straw. He even mentioned things I barely remembered, like the time I forgot to send Gabriella a happy birthday text, even though I called her and sent her a gift. He said, "You never truly accepted Gabriella as a part of my life," which seemed completely unfair to me. I did so much to build a relationship with her. I helped plan her wedding, listened to her vent about work, and even mediated when she and Brian had a huge fight early in their marriage. Now I'm sitting in a hotel room because Neil asked me to give him space. My mother is gone. My marriage is apparently over. I don't regret the choice I made because I chose to be with my dying mother. If that cost me a marriage, so be it. Anyway, this marriage didn't seem right for me. Update 1. The vast majority agreed that the marriage wasn't worth it, and that my husband should have been understanding. Some even said he should have accompanied me on the trip to see my mother, because my stepdaughter could have celebrated at 7 or 8 months. So, thank you for the support. Many people asked for more details, so I want to fill in some of the blanks and catch you up on what's been going on. I reached out to my brother and some close friends who were amazing. My brother even flew out to stay with me, and it's nice to have a familiar face around. We spent hours reminiscing about Mom, how she always made time for us, even when she worked multiple jobs, and what an amazing mother she was who loved us. It's made me realize how much she shaped the person I am. I miss her more than I can put into words, but I'm determined to honor her memory in the best way possible. Unfortunately, the situation with Neil and Gabriella has only gotten worse. Gabriella is constantly badmouthing me, and Neil seems to be okay with this. I haven't spoken to them directly, but it's not necessary because I can find out about these things anyway. After hearing this, I decided to consult a lawyer. When I explained the situation to her, she was shocked. He told me, "Neil's behavior, especially serving you the divorce papers so quickly, shows signs of emotional manipulation." He even suggested that the divorce papers might have been premeditated, which honestly hurt me deeply. But at least now I'm taking steps to protect myself. She's helping me make sure my assets are safe and that I get a fair settlement. Fortunately, we live in a state where marital property is divided equitably, so that gives me some relief. She's also advised me to document anything I receive from them, or that I discover, in electronic or paper form. What really opened my eyes was something my friend showed me. She had screenshots of Gabriella's social media posts from the past few months, which I hadn't been aware of. There were several passive-aggressive posts about stepdads. It turns out Gabriella had blocked me from seeing certain posts, so I had no idea any of this was happening. The post started right after her wedding, which explains the sudden change in her behavior toward me. The worst of all, she wrote something about how her mother would be turning in her grave if she knew what kind of person her father had married. That one hurt me deeply, because I never tried to replace her or overstep my authority in any way. There were also comments from her friends, and even Nil, that seemed to support what she was saying. What I find even worse is Nil's response when I pointed out the posts. She told me I was trying to use that as an excuse and accused me of being toxic for looking at the posts in the first place. The truth is, I wasn't the one who looked at the posts. My friend showed them to me because she was genuinely concerned about what was being said. But for Nil, it didn't matter. He's so focused on defending Gabriella. Then, there's something my lawyer pointed out that really stuck with me. The timing of all this. Gabriella's party had been planned for weeks. But those divorce papers were drawn up too quickly after I left for California. Very quickly. It's hard not to wonder if all of this was already brewing before it happened. Were Nil and Gabriella talking about kicking me out behind my back? But when I think about how everything played out, the party, Gabriella's posts, Nil's sudden cold shoulder, I don't think it's a coincidence. I guess they were planning something at the party, but my trip was the perfect excuse. My brother is still here with me. He and the memory of my mother are what keep my mind off this. As for my marriage, Nil was looking for an excuse to divorce me, so it's time to give him one and end all this. It's not that I want to stay married to him after all, but I'm still surprised by his lack of tact in doing so after my mother's death. Update 2. A few days ago, I received an email from Brian, Gabriella's husband, which I wasn't expecting because we're not close, and I don't think I even have his number. But what's important is its content. Brian apologized for not reaching out sooner, and he explained some things that are important to everything he's been going through. He told me that Gabriella has been dealing with unresolved grief over her mother's death, and apparently, her wedding brought a lot of those emotions to the surface. Although she's been going to therapy, instead of working through her feelings, she's been projecting them onto me. Up to this point, I don't think I've shared anything new, a few details, but I think, broadly speaking, there are many things I already knew or had guessed. But the most important thing is that, according to Brian, Gabriella had planned the party and was planning to make things difficult for me at it. She wanted to create a last-minute drama to see my reaction, as a kind of test of my loyalty to her family. According to Brian, Gabriella believed that if I failed this test, it would confirm her theory that stepmothers are always the bad guys. In the end, she didn't even have to test that, which was to ask me at the last minute to take care of the food, either buying it or cooking it, due to some catering disaster, but my mother's death had given her the perfect excuse. Brian also shared some things about Neil that make the situation even worse. Brian has apparently been urging Gabriella to delve deeper into her issues in therapy, but Neil has been undermining those efforts. Instead of encouraging Gabriella to take responsibility for her feelings, Neil has been validating her fears about abandonment, reinforcing the idea that I am a bad stepmother. Neil told Brian it was easier to blame me than to make Gabriella take responsibility, because he didn't want to upset her. This seems even more Machiavellian to me. My relationship with Gabriella wasn't that of best friends, but it was pretty good for a stepmother and stepdaughter. But Neil has been making things worse just because it was easier for him. Neil wasn't just passive in this situation. He actively chose to protect Gabriella at my expense, even when it meant destroying our marriage. After reading Brian's email, I immediately forwarded it to my lawyer. She told me it's an important piece of evidence, especially because it shows that Gabriella's actions were deliberate and that Neil was complicit. She believes this could strengthen my case for an expedited divorce, and perhaps even protect me from any financial claims Neil tries to make. Following your advice, I've also started looking into therapy for myself. After everything I've been through, I know I need help processing all of this. Between the loss of my mother, the collapse of my marriage, and now discovering Gabriella's manipulations, it's been too much. I've found a few therapists in my area, and I hope to start sessions soon. This isn't a situation I can solve alone, or over a beer with a friend. I need professional help. It's also not one of those things where I can just find an innocent person and blame them. I don't think that's going to fix things. I don't think it's doing Gabriella any good, and it definitely hasn't done any good to our marriage. In the meantime, I moved out of the hotel and into a small, temporary apartment, because living in a hotel wasn't good for my wallet. Plus, this is starting to feel more like a new beginning, because at least it's more homey than a hotel room. My brother is still here, and I'm more grateful than he can imagine. He's helped me furnish the apartment, unpack, and even hang photos to make it feel like home. He's also been there emotionally, always willing to listen when I need to vent or sort out my feelings. He's even offered to stay with me if I ever feel alone. Honestly, I don't know how I'd be handling all of this without him. To protect my mental health, I've made some difficult but necessary decisions. I've blocked Neil and Gabriella on social media and asked mutual friends not to give me updates about them. In the email, Brian also talked about his relationship with his wife and how difficult it's been for him these past few months, especially these last few weeks, because Gabriella seems to have regressed. He was aware of some of Gabriella's issues due to the loss of her mother, but Neil has only made her feel worse lately. He thinks it was my husband who made me the enemy. I don't know what's going on in Neil's head right now, but it's definitely not right, and he's dragging his daughter into all of this. At least those are Brian's concerns, and I don't think he's far off the mark. Update 3. The last few days have brought me a lot of clarity. Neil finally got back to me, but not to apologize. Instead, I wanted to negotiate. It seems he realized that filing for divorce so quickly, especially while I was grieving for my mother, wasn't a smart move. My lawyer explained to me that his behavior throughout this whole mess could make him look really bad in court. I think Neil is trying to avoid the embarrassment and legal consequences of his impulsiveness. Now he's eager to resolve everything quietly and quickly. And although I agreed to discuss it, I made it clear that my well-being comes first. On the other hand, Gabriella's therapist contacted me, completely with Gabriella's permission. She wanted to explain some things to me, which, honestly, gave me a lot of perspective. Apparently, Gabriella's unresolved grief over her mother hit her hard around the time of her wedding. The therapist said, Gabriella has been dealing with feelings of abandonment and guilt for years, but instead of working through them, she channeled them into resentment toward you. I also learned that the therapist had warned Gabriella against having the 6th anniversary party, recognizing it as an unhealthy way to deal with her emotions. But Neil, as always, went along with it so as not to upset Gabriella. While this context doesn't excuse Gabriella's behavior, it helps me understand why she acted the way she did. It's sad, honestly, because it seems like she's trapped in a cycle of misdirected grief and anger, and Neil has been enabling it, instead of helping her truly heal. After some back and forth, I decided to accept Neil's settlement offer, but only under specific conditions. My attorney has ensured that the terms are fair, not only financially, but also to give me a fair hearing. I will retain my personal assets along with compensation for the emotional stress and disruption this situation has caused me. Most importantly, I've insisted on a complete separation, with no contact with Neil or Gabriella, no social media ties, and no persistent connections that could draw me back into their toxic dynamic. My lawyer is finalizing the documents, and I'm hopeful this chapter will be closed soon. Some members of Neil's family have reached out, and their reactions have been mixed. The most surprising thing was his sister, who called me to tell me how shocked and disappointed she was by Neil's behavior. She even told me that this isn't the first time Neil's permissiveness with Gabriella has caused problems. Apparently, his late wife had similar concerns about their relationship before she passed away. It made me realize this wasn't something I could have fixed, no matter how hard I tried. Their unhealthy dynamic existed long before I arrived on the scene. The biggest shock, however, came from Brian, Gabriella's husband. He contacted me and asked to meet for coffee, saying he had some things to share about Neil's behavior patterns that he thought I should know for the divorce. I agreed, but only with my attorney present to ensure everything I shared could be properly documented and used if necessary. I'm still a little hesitant about what Brian wants to say, but his willingness to talk gives me hope that someone in Gabriella's life is trying to help her make healthier choices. Update for this could be my last update, as long as nothing happens that forces me to write a new one. I've spoken with Brian, as well as Gabriella, and my divorce is finalized. I think this part of my life has come to a close, and I also want to close this chapter by sharing it on Reddit. But before I go, I must tell you a few things. The divorce, being the simplest, comes first. Everything has been signed, and according to my lawyer, and also my own perspective, it was more than fair. A proper separation is fair and includes financial compensation. In return, I can't discuss our divorce openly to protect my ex's reputation. However, since I've used other names, as is often recommended here, my lawyer has told me I can share it here, mainly because there are some details slightly changed to make it inadmissible in court. More on this later. I met with Brian, and while he didn't give me much more evidence for the divorce, nothing we could use to get a better settlement, he did tell me a few things about him and Gabriella. They're also going through a divorce, but it's not final yet. Brian believes his wife is a very damaged person and has done what he could to help her. But Neil has made it so difficult for him that he's decided to step back. According to him, the divorce is being handled amicably. And although Gabriella doesn't agree with the divorce, she understands it. Brian believes she seems to understand the problems he's having, but that the divorce is still going ahead because it only happened after reaching this point. He hopes she'll get help and resolve all her issues, because even though their marriage can't work right now, he still loves her. I asked him if he couldn't agree to stay with her while he works through his issues, since he still loves her. But he said he's been through this before, and he doesn't want to be disappointed again. Fair enough. Finally, I received an email from Gabriella, as she was blocked. She offered an apology and an explanation, along with other questions related to her father. She offered me an apology, which was extended to a social media post, which I had to check to see if it was true. And it was. She told me that it's been very difficult for her recently, something I already knew from her therapist, and that she owed me an apology. She explained that her father has been largely responsible for directing her feelings toward me, although she's also admitted that it's partly her fault, and that's why she wanted to tell me how sorry she is. She also said she's very sorry I lost my mother, which she knows very well, and that all this jumble of emotions has turned her into this person recently. She told me about Brian and said she was sad, but understood and wanted the best for him. She said she was going to take his recovery very seriously, and that included keeping his father away because he was the source of his lack of improvement. She also offered to meet and talk if I needed him to apologize in person, to which I replied that it wasn't necessary, that I forgave her. She also apologized for ruining my marriage. But in my response, I told her it wasn't her fault, and that Neil simply needed an excuse to leave me, instead of the way she and Brian were handling things. She also confessed that Neil had the papers practically ready to be served, and it only took one call for the lawyer to put the final touches on them when I traveled to see my mother. She had a conversation with her father after my divorce was finalized, and she knows the kind of arrangement we reached, where I can't talk about my divorce. But she told me it seemed unfair, and that if I couldn't talk about it, she could. So 2 days after this email, she posted apologizing, clarifying what happened, and talking about Neil. So, whether or not anyone can recognize Neil through this post, the truth is known to everyone who matters. I haven't heard from Neil, though I did receive a few messages from people who hadn't reached out to me before just to show their support. Finally, I told Gabriella I was glad she's putting her mental health first. I don't hold any resentment toward her, and I think under different circumstances, with a better husband and father than Neil, we could have had a very good relationship. And that would be it. I think it clarifies a lot of things for me and reassures me that my problem wasn't with me as a stepmother. I have nothing but words of gratitude for all the support you provided.